Hi, my name is Mike McManaman, and I'm the IPS product owner at LeverX. Today, I wanted to go over workflow templates with you. In a previous video, we created master data, which is the building blocks for workflow templates. But now we want to bring it all together, and I'm going to show you an existing workflow template in our system so you can understand the basics. So first thing is the basic data tab. So we can see workflow template ID, which is just a unique identifier that is given on save of the workflow. We have a user modifiable checkbox. If this is checked, then users can modify the workflow in some way, add and delete tasks, for example. We have the ability to deactivate a template so it's no longer inserted and started. We have a checkbox for ad hoc workflows. So, most of the time you'll have one workflow for an object or for a process, but it's also possible that you can add a whole workflow on the fly if this checkbox is checked. We have object ID, which is the identifier for the master data that you want to use for this workflow template. And just a reminder, you can use one piece of master data for hundreds of workflow templates if you want. Then we have template description, which the end user will see, which will describe the workflow that's being inserted. And right here, you'll see calendar ID and work hours. So in IPS, we do some calculations if you want. So you can determine how long a given workflow is going to take, but it's important that you fill in this information if you want to use that functionality. And then we have a template administrator section, which can be like here, a single user. It could be a group of users. It could be attribute based. But essentially, a template administrator is if something goes wrong with a workflow, we need to send it to somebody. And this is where you identify who that person or persons happen to be. Then we have administrative data, which is self-explanatory, and a change log, which you can put in some notes about what you're changing. Let's go to the attributes tab. So we have two types of attributes. We have object-specific attributes, which are pulled from what you configured in the master data, and depending on the objects. In this case, it's an IPS ticket. And then we have template-specific attributes. In this case, next ticket status, but depending on the system task you're using, you're going to have some variable that's going to change. And this will make more sense once I show you decision logic on the mapping tab. And then we have conditions. So in IPS, it's possible to have insert and start conditions for workflow. And a lot of the time, they're the exact same. So you can see in this case, if it's a certain ticket type and a certain status, we insert and start the workflow at the same time. But they can be different, and they can be pretty complex. And then the most interesting tab, the mapping tab. So I've already built this workflow, but it's as simple as dragging and dropping from the left side from phases or tasks. So what you would do is you would select a phase, drag it over here, and then you click on task, then drag them over here. And that was how you create the initial template or the initial structure of a workflow. Now, once you've started to build this, I'm going to click on an example. I'm going to click on prepare request on the right side. You can see on the top here, you can decide if something needs to be moved to the left or right, up and down, parallel, sequential. We have the ability to add insert if conditions as well, so that's possible as well. I don't have that in this specific example, but you see we have some flexibility here. So maybe what's most interesting is down below here. I'm going to move myself over to the left. We can see that we have a bunch of information here about an individual given task. So on the general data task, you can see we have a hyperlink here, which if you were to click it, it actually pulls up a pop-up with what's existing on the master data. So you don't have to go over the master data and see what this task is. Here's where you would define the execution type, which is an important concept in IPS. So when you're doing a dialogue task, you can have any, all, or per agent execution types, and I'll explain what that means. So with any execution type for a dialogue task, if you have 3 people assigned and this says execution type, that means any person that's assigned to the task can make a decision, and that's the decision for the task. We also have execution type all, which means if there's 3 people assigned to a task, all 3 would have to complete it. We also have per agent, and this is typically used in more advanced approval scenarios, but per agent, the best way to explain it is there's circumstances where you want maybe one person from an engineering group, but then you want everybody from marketing and then you want a manager to do an approval. So you can have these complex approval systems with, any or all different groups of people, and that's when you would use per agent. And here we can put also task duration. So I described that a little bit in the basic data tab, but IPS has the capability to track how long tasks should take so you can kind of report against them and see how long things are taking. We have an agents tab. So this is where you assign who's actually going to do this task. So it could be a role, it could be, in this case, it's an attribute that's on the ticket. We also have the ability to do user exits for more complex agent determination. You also have individual users. So you can add one or many here. Another interesting concept is end conditions. So sometimes you want to say, if a certain value is input. Sometimes it's like if reason is, a certain value, I want to skip over this task in the workflow. So it's possible with if conditions or end conditions to be able to, based on certain attributes, to be able to skip parts of the workflow. So that is interesting in some scenarios. And then a lot of magic happens under the decision logic. So, you have multiple decisions. You can see we have assign value go to step, but I'll click on all the actions. So assign value, this is where you do that next ticket status. So maybe going to hit a change ticket status and you want it to assign a value of 20 when that happens because you want the workflow to move forward and then you want the ticket status to shift. This is where you assign a value to a variable that's going into a system task. Then we have a go-to step. So go-to step is where do I want to jump in the workflow based on this decision? So a lot of customers, they have this typical scenario where they prepare some kind of request. It doesn't matter in the process. It goes to review or approve. But they also want that feedback loop. So somebody who reviews and approves can't just move forward. It might need to go backwards to get more information. So this is where you use the go-to step to jump back in workflow to be able to send it back for rework. Then we have the ability to end workflow. We also have the ability for a few other things, including the ability to check dependencies to make sure that, there's complex scenarios where you might want to say, I want this other workflow or this other ticket or this other thing to complete before this can be completed, this decision. And then the other interesting one is a decision check. So we have the ability to say, look, you can't approve this until these conditions are met. So a typical one that we hear about a lot is, I don't want anybody to be able to approve this until these objects are in a certain status. So that's where we have decision logic, and that's where we can plug in some code to have that work. And then the other interesting feature here, escalations. So we have the ability to say, if this task isn't executed, after so many days, then we'll send a follow-up email as a reminder. We can send it to the individual user or to the manager.